Welcome, everyone. This is a good opportunity for us to find out what's happening in accessibility around the globe. Just to get us started, though, my name is Bree Norton. I'm co-chair of AussieWay, and also am involved in the Standard Accessibility Reporting Initiative. We are a partner of SAR, and we wanted to share basically what was happening in this space. I'm just going to start with acknowledgement of country. So I pay my respects to the Ngunnawal people here in Canberra and to the Ngunnawal Nation, and um, and to all Aboriginal and/or Torres Strait Islander people in attendance today. Please feel free to put in the chat your name, where you're from, and who, if you pay your respects to, in the chat. But to get us started, I'm going to introduce you to Chris Law, Dr. Chris Law, who's going to share with us what standard accessibility reporting is and what our goals are. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Bree. Yeah, I have a presentation for you, and then should have time for questions as we go. I'll describe all the images as well as we go. So thanks very much. I think this is the second time I've managed to get to talk to the folks at AussieWay. Pleased to have AussieWay as a partner with SAR, Standard Accessibility Reporting, and I think another webinar I did a couple of years ago when this started, just in case some people have seen us when we started a couple of years ago. I did that through one of our organizational members, Accessibility Oz. So thanks for being here. Let me talk you through why we're here, what we're doing, and how people can get involved if they want to get involved. So I spent some time in Australia. I did my PhD at RMIT University and in Melbourne, and the term fair go was in use when I was there. The concept of making society fair so that everyone gets a fair crack at it. The other term that is commonly used is the level playing field. Here I've got actually an image, just a diagram image of Australian rules football playing field. And do you know that playing fields aren't actually level? They're not. If they were level, they wouldn't drain when it rained. So if you look at it on a side end elevation and an end elevation, a field is usually slightly curved. And in certain sports, in a rule book, you're going to find an actual rule that says how much it can be curved by. Some sports, they don't say this. They just take a look at it and say, well, that looks like it's sloped one side or the other. And so there's companies out there that will help you actually make the perfect field and get all your angles exactly right. But teams get together in associations, and then as part of those associations, they get together and say, well, what are the rules that we're all going to play by, and how do we score things? So got an announcement for you that in 2025 there's going to be a new rule. Okay, so each time St Kilda scores a goal, they're going to get 7 points now, and everyone else, there's no change. Everyone else is going to get 6 points for a goal. Got the logos up of the teams here. I picked St Kilda because that's where I lived when I was there. So look, obviously this is absurd. Playing fair means agreed upon scoring. Everybody understands what the rules are. Sure, rules are open to interpretation sometimes, but there really isn't an interpretation of when the ball goes through the uprights and it doesn't touch the sides, then it's 6 points, right? So this obviously wouldn't work. But we're the accessibility field. If we were using the same sorts of problems that we might have by someone doing the scores slightly different. Uh, Actually, yeah, that's us. That's the accessibility field right now. So here I've got different colors circled around the different team logos of the Australian rules football league, and they're all different color coded because they're all doing everything. They're all doing it, but just a bit differently. So if I had, say, a website, and I asked each of these different accessibility companies, and I said, "Hey, could you test this website for accessibility?" Well, one way of might be to give me a overall score as a customer, and they say, "Well, it's 4.5 stars or it's 3 stars." So they're using a 1 to 5 star scale. So we've got 5 or 6 companies doing that. Another company or set of companies might be giving me their results in a 0 to 100% scale. And yet another company might or two might be using A plus, B minus, C minus, all the way down to E minus. So we're all using different scales. Another way of doing it, yeah, I've seen this from companies. You're either WCAG conformant or you're not conformant. Okay, that's it. And here's your report. Here's all the details, but overall you're not conformant because you didn't comply with everything. Another company just might use their scale from all the way down the bottom as pretty crook, all the way up to Fed income, and everything in between. At least this is me trying to remember my Australian slang from when I lived there. Also, between each company, there's no agreement on what constitutes a valid score, right? So say if I took the companies that were doing a percentage score, and you might have two companies scoring their own way. Sure, they're using the 0 to 100% scale, but they might come up with very different scores because they have very different interpretations of what that score is. And so, in terms of our legitimacy as a field and our messaging that we give to our customers on how accessible things are, and then those companies have to take that and they can use that in their marketing messages, right? To say how accessible they are, right? So an accessibility company. So in terms of a marketing message from industry to say, look, we've invested a lot in accessibility and now we're really good. Okay, we're really good at accessibility. That's the measure. Okay. Or we're the most accessible. Or we're inclusive. That's the marketing message. Or funds are accessibility. That's us. Okay. So someone comes along and says, well, we're the best. Okay. How do you know you're the best? Marketing is just really about telling people that you're better than the competition, right? That somehow if you buy product A versus product B is better than product A. Okay. And we sell product A and it's the best. Okay. When you get an actual standard of scoring for a certain element, you really struggle to say, well, we're the best if your scores don't reflect that. And companies are living and dying by review scores provided by consumers of overall just satisfaction. If you go do your online shopping, you're going to see these review scores. But what about accessibility? There isn't anything. So in terms of we're the best, companies are striving to place themselves in the marketplace as the we're the top of our game. Here's just a montage of various sports teams, types of sports teams, all jumping up for joy and celebrating that they're winning the championship. And companies really want to be able to be seen that they are doing the best. Well, what are we giving them as the accessibility field to tell them that they're the best? You know, you're B plus, you're conformant, you're fair income. Okay, nobody knows. What does that really mean, and how do you compare? And for every winning team, there's always the pictures at the end of the uh, show showing the losing team with their heads in their hands and that sort of thing. So back to this idea of a level playing field, right? Well, where are we in accessibility in terms of this level playing field? This is pretty much where we are. This is a sort of a joke image I found on the web. Someone's put a soccer field on the slope of a mountain, so anybody playing would just sort of fall right down into the lake at the bottom. This is what we have. This is our level playing field right now. Nobody can agree upon the score, right? So how do you play the game on this so-called level playing field? We need to change this. And that's really what standard accessibility reporting is all about. That's what we formed this nonprofit for. Um, here's just a mock-up image of a label that you might place on a washing machine, and it would tell you how accessible the washing machine is. It gives you an overall score. Here's 3.6 stars out of 5. And it tells you the name of the washing machine and the model number. And then for accessibility, it's broken out by the different types of disabilities. So on this mock-up label here, we got like low vision is 68 and blindness is 65, deafness and hearing loss 75, limited reach and strength 95, limited manual dexterity 90. So the idea here would be that if you could create such a label that you could put on a washing machine or a microwave or a coffee maker or a alarm system or a Bluetooth speaker or a website or an app, that you would be able to then, as the consumer who's making a purchasing decision, say, well, did they do an overall good job on accessibility? Well, if they did 1 star, I would assume that this is not a quality product in terms of accessibility. And if they got 5 stars or 4 stars, yeah, it seems like they put in the effort, right? Now it doesn't mean that the thing's fully accessible to everyone. It's just on this scale, if they got 5 stars, they've really gone to the highest level they can. But still, there's going to be some people that are not able to use it. There are some people with severe mental disabilities, cognitive disabilities, that wouldn't understand the purpose of a washing machine. Okay, so you can't just make a blanket statement that it's going to make it's not that it's accessible to everyone. It's accessible to the extent that the people that are making it have done the best job with the tools and resources that they have and the guidelines and the standards like WCAG and other relevant standards. They've done the best job possible. And then for the person with the disability, they need to be able to say, well, actually, so you've got an overall score for accessibility, great, but what about my disability, right? So it's important for our field. We break things down into, blindness or use without vision is another way of saying that, use with low vision, deafness, or use without hearing, use without audio, limited reach and strength, and that sort of thing. So if I see a product that looks like it did pretty well on accessibility, and if I'm deaf and it's got a really bad score for deaf, and I say, well, okay, that's not the product for me, then I'm not going to buy that product. I'll buy this other product. Okay. So if you can create that sort of system, you can implement it everywhere that people are looking for products. So this might look this is sort of just a draft mock-up of scoring in use on a shopping website where you've got customer review scores and you can filter uh, your scores and say, look, I only want to see things with review scores that are 4 stars and up. Great. Okay, that's a capability you have now. Well, what if you had an accessibility score and you could say, look, I only want to see the products with accessibility score of 4 stars and up. Okay. And then show me just the results on deafness and hearing loss. You know, that may be the choice of the person doing the shopping. Okay. I've blurred out the rest of the screen, but it's like technology gadgets. Um, there could be anything. And then maybe you're shopping for an app, and uh, you're in the app store, and the app costs $1.99, and it's got 4.2 stars out of 5,000 ratings from customers, but then it's got a 4.8 accessibility score, right? So now, if the question is, do I spend this $2 on this app, and it says 4.8 stars? Well, I'm pretty sure it's going to be accessible, right? Well, what have you got now? You go to the app store, you got nothing, right? So you're going to buy a $2 app, uh, but you have no idea if it's accessible, and no, ask your friends, ask the community, sure, but nobody's really putting this on regular uh, um, review sites, and it's not in the app store. Okay, so this is just a vision of what it could be if we achieve our goals of putting this thing together. So you'll notice that if I go back here, these three scenarios that I've just talked about, very different ways of showing an accessibility score. One might be on a sticker that's on the washing machine inside the store, and other might be online and might give you a fair amount of screen real estate, as it were, to describe how accessible something is. And on the app, though, you may just have the space for just the stars and a single number, and that's it. Um, in this app example here, I've added a link to get more details and that sort of thing. So what happens if you select that link and say, well, show me more details? Okay, got to figure that out. So searching for accessibility scores right now. This is where we are. This isn't a thing. People are not doing this. We're all working in the accessibility field. Some of us have been doing it for 30, 40 years. Some of you might be new to the accessibility field. But this idea of talking about the fact that there should be a score isn't new. But right now, in this world, people aren't searching based off of accessibility scores because they just don't exist, okay, in the marketplace. So in the future, it will be if we make it happen. Okay. So who's we? On our website, there's a link to see all the people that are working on this project as members of the nonprofit. And so we have a board of directors, and we have a management team, and we have a standards development stewardship panel. You may recognize this slide is not designed to be read. Just go to the website standardari.org/people to get the details of who the people are. But you may recognize Bree Norton right there in the middle there. Bree Norton is our education and outreach director for social media. And you also may recognize Sam Cantor, who's an Australian who lives in the US now, and she's on the call today. Um, but maybe she'll come back to Australia because we just had a really weird election over here. Okay, so SAR membership. This is the other part of the we. This organization is made up of member organizations. You see Aussie Way right there, and um, uh, again on our website there's a directory of all the different member organizations. There's around about 30 member organizations right now. Some household names in the accessibility field like Level Access, TPGI, WebAIM. Um, Accessibility Oz is there, that sort of thing. So, and IAAP, if you're a member of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, well, they're a member of us too. So, um, there you go. Okay. But in terms of the actual work now, so we are developing standards right now where we have a project team that is formed from our membership in order to create the new um, standards for the labels. So they're listed here. Again, they're listed on the people page. And there's 14 or 15 folks there. You'll recognize maybe the name Ricky Onsman, who's here on the call as well. So Ricky is with TPGI and he's working with us as well. I'm going to call out some of his work in just a moment. So the membership of the teams that we have for creating the standards are open to anyone that joins SAR as a member. So these are the folks working on it right now. Let me just talk about some of the things that we're doing. Again, the whole goal is to create this kind of label. So sure, we use this washing machine label as an example. It's the one that's on our website, but it has to work for anything. So one of the things that Ricky did first of all, you know, following some of our initial meetings, is the suggestion of, well, why don't we just try it, just see what it comes up with if we try to come up with an overall score for a given type of product. And so Ricky went through this exercise of looking at streaming media providers. And here we've got Netflix, Disney Plus, and Amazon Prime, and trying to come up with a label for them. And so we necessarily limited it to just the desktop version of them, rather than your media sticks and the other things, and looking at Amazon Prime or Netflix through your smart TV. So none of that. This was just strictly on using screen readers and other testing tools available. Go through a process and then start trying to figure out, well, for the different accessibility, for the different disability types, what are the scores? So there's an overall score here of 4.03 for Netflix, 3.87 for Disney Plus, and 4.09 for Amazon Prime. Okay, so if you can imagine that somebody is trying to make an overall assessment of, well, which one has the best accessibility, you could say, well, they're all really close in this scenario, but one of them has the highest score, 4.09, and one of them has the lowest score. So there you go, there's your ranking. And it's just really the first sort of foray into this world. I gave Ricky a lot of thanks for this. He's the first person to actually go through this as a process. And then we take that experience and then we build from it. So that's the initial experience. And going through the experience of trying to create an overall score reveals a lot of questions. And that's the basis for the conversations and the basis for the projects of what comes next, right? So uh, we need to figure out how the score is made and what is on the label. Um, this is an intentionally blurry image because the um, the uh, the issues that we're discussing are internal issues to the team. Part of our membership structure is that the people who are members get to sit in the meetings and discuss what it is that we're doing and weigh in with their opinions and ultimately get a vote on whether things go one way or another. And so uh, in these images, I've got the label, and then the things on the left are call outs to do with how the score is created. And the things on the right are call outs to do with how things on the label are look and feel, right? So um, just to give you some examples, we would, you know, we've shown it as a blue background, okay, right? Now you need something consistent. In the US, they have an Energy Star label. It's always yellow with black text, right? If you look at the nutrition label on the side of a box of cornflakes in the US, it's always black text on a white background. So you've got to have this consistency. Well, that's one question out of probably 100 that you need to define, right? You know, if somebody on our team said, well, we should make this the font Comic Sans because it was fun, we would kick them out of the meeting and say, no, let's never hear from them again, right? So, um, what font you use, what's going to be easy to read by people with low vision, what's going to be the best font. So we need to choose that and then propose that as part of this overall standard of how the label works and how the label looks in different scenarios. You know, that scenario of the um, uh, the Play Store and you're looking for an app. You know, how much information gets shown? If you click on the link, where does it take you? That sort of thing. All of these things have to be worked out. We're all volunteers and we're all working on this together under the banner of membership. Okay. So I'll give you a few additional scenarios to think about. Just a little taster of the types of question that we need to come up with answers to. Okay, so say you've decided on a star system, 4 out of 5 stars, 3 out of 5 stars, 2.1 out of 5 stars, you know, that sort of thing. So say you've decided on that system, and say you've got some conundrums that you have to come up with an answer to. Right. So here's one. So say you scored 4.5, but one user group was excluded. So I think I talked before about if I was deaf and the score for deafness was really low. Well, it may be that there's actually only like 2 criteria for deafness as to whether captions are showing, which are relevant for a particular product, right? So say it's a media streaming thing, and you say, well, is captions present or not present? Um, and you say, well, actually, there's only 2 criteria, so it doesn't really affect the overall score, but they didn't include captions, so that score is like down the bottom. Is it? Can you use it? So what would we do? Do we say to the manufacturers, uh, if you exclude one user group, you're never getting above 4 stars, or you're never getting above 3 stars? We have to decide. We have to figure out. We have to come up with a valid and reasonable suggestion to our members, who will eventually vote on this. And so through the process, what we will be doing is we will be working those things out and making those suggestions and sending that to our members, our member organizations, because we have more organizations who are members than are sitting on the standards development teams. But our larger membership gets access to those questions, gets access to those thought processes and prototypes, and so that they then see what the proposal is, and we invite them to tell us their thoughts on it. Another example might be if you had, say, a washing machine that had an accessible app, but didn't have a directly accessible interface. So what I mean is they say, well, we've added this interconnectivity so that you can use it with your Alexa voice control, or you can use it with a phone app. And so the phone app is fully accessible on its own. So surely we should get 5 stars, right? Well, okay, but if the internet is out and I don't have my phone with me, and I'm at my washing machine and I'm blind, can I touch the buttons and get voice feedback? Well, if the company says no, well, okay, so what's the maximum score? Is the maximum score 5 or is it 4? Do we say you absolutely have to have a directly accessible interface in order to score highly? That's the debate. That's the sort of things that need to happen. Okay. So about us and our membership, um, the one of the key benefits, obviously, that I've been talking about is that you actually get to participate in these standards development teams. Uh, we do not have outside members contributing or showing up at meetings. It's strictly for the people that have become members of the organization. Without our members, we don't have enough to support any of the work that we do. So that's one of the core benefits. Only members get to see what our prototypes are through the process. There may be some imagery that we'll use in our outreach campaigns to show possible ideas. But in terms of those types of questions that we will be, those, I gave you two example questions out of 100 questions. That's what the members are getting access to and using prototypes through the development. It gets one of the key benefits is preparing yourself. So we will create these standards. We're going at the speed that we can with the volunteers we have. We're still actively fundraising in order to see if we can speed this up through the injection of funds. So that's part of my job. And the team, the organizations that are members will be able to prepare for the day when that's there. So it's either you got to learn all the rules when you show up in your kit at the football field, and you got to learn the rules and be put into the game, because people will start asking you for standardized scores at some point, or you've been there at practice all the way through, and you've shown up and you've read the rule book, and you've got to try out the drills and figure this game out, and now you're ready to go and you're ready to jump in. Well, those two players look very different when they run onto the field. Okay. And then finally, well, it's finally on this short bullet list. There's a lot more in our list of benefits in our membership handbook that's on the website. But you get to vote on adoption of the standards. So each member gets one vote, member organization or individual member gets one vote. And so what the standards development team is doing in preparing their proposals is they've got to do it in such a way that they have to convince the rest of the membership, because the rest of the membership is going to vote. Okay. The annual cost of membership, or it says fees here, but we just turned it to cost. So I'll say the annual cost. People don't like the term fees, so part of my job is keep track of all these little details and change things. So the annual cost of membership. Um, we have an individual, and that's available to anybody in the public, just to be a supporter. There's no real requirements beyond that, but there's certain other benefits there. But then to get those benefits on the left of the page here with participation and voting and stuff like that, you'd have to become a professional voting member. But that's for people who are independent of current companies. And so you'd add on another $100 of that. So the individual professional voting membership is $200 US. The organizational membership is $400, and that actually covers all your employees. So if you have 10 employees that are working in the accessibility space, and you want to send person A to this thing and person B to this thing, you can do that. And then we also have a strategic partner membership as well. So that is $500 for nonprofits, or anywhere up to $10,000. It's in $1,000 increments. The strategic partners get to participate in a stronger way by advising and providing counsel to the heads of the standards development teams, and they get first access to prototypes and things like this. So there's a number of advantages to being a strategic partner. Okay. I'll close my presentation with this, which is that I'm sure you're all thinking about the upcoming holiday season and Christmas gift giving, and that's what everybody's doing, who celebrates Christmas. Not the whole world, but certainly a sizable portion in Australia and the US and the UK, where I'm from. And you're going to be doing your holiday shopping, and you're going to look for gifts to give to people. Now, we all know there's 20% of the population who have disabilities, and you're going to be shopping for somebody that maybe has a disability. It could be as small a gadget as a Bluetooth speaker that talks, and you say, wow, it talks, I can give it to my friend who's blind. And only then for them to receive it at the other end and find out that it only talks as a gimmick in places, and it doesn't really work very well. And but you didn't know that when you were buying it, because nobody did a review and did a score for it. And then you're probably not going to buy a washing machine for somebody for Christmas, right? But if their washing machine breaks over Christmas, yeah, they might need a new one. And if they've got a disability, if they've got arthritis in their hands, if they've got low vision because they're getting old, and even with the best glasses, they're still struggling. Well, what's the best washing machine for them? How do you know? You don't. So I'll leave you with this thought. This is my thought for, well, what are the three frontiers for accessibility right now? The first, obviously, is AI. It's everywhere these days, and it's not something that we get into. We're looking at the accessibility of products and the accessibility of apps and websites and things like that. There's some contribution of AI to what we do, but there's a lot of people in the accessibility field who are getting very excited about AI and doing lots of stuff. Personally, it's not me. I'm not excited about AI. Um, but I do think it's a frontier that a lot of people are putting their time into. The second frontier is helping organizations to become more inclusive and to change their practices. So, you know, we've got a for every 100 people who do accessibility testing, we've got maybe one person that can actually talk to the issues with how do you get accessibility embedded throughout an organization? Where do you start on that journey? How do you conduct maturity assessments, that sort of thing? But I think I see more and more companies that are requesting this as a support, and more companies offering it as a support. But it's still a niche area, but I think it's one that will expand. And then the third in my list, I don't mean to say the final frontier like Star Trek, but the third frontier that I'll talk about here is consumer product accessibility. Almost every consumer product that you have in your home, the technology products, from your alarm system to your thermostat, washing machines, microwave ovens, they're not accessible right now. And if we succeed in what we're trying to do, we're going to start saying, look, the review is what drives the change. Companies that have really bad consumer product reviews, uh, they pay attention because it affects their sales. It's all about marketing, remember, right? So the companies that want to do well are going to start saying to themselves, well, how do we make our microwaves accessible? You know, how do we make the washing machine and the Bluetooth speaker accessible? And they're going to look for support, and they're going to look for people who are involved in this and working on it. I think that in terms of the number of people that are working on that, I think for 100 people working in accessibility, I'd say less than one is working on consumer product and hardware accessibility. So it's a frontier, and we hope to open that up with what we do. Okay, so that's about us, and that's my pitch to you. And as members of Aussie Way, please do get in touch, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Oh, look, thanks, Chris. Just before we do go to questions, I just want to share some complementary work that Aussie Way has been doing as part of our accessible ICT procurement. So we have a PAL, our product accessibility list. We use a scoring methodology that's based on any public knowledge for a digital service or product. So it could be Miro or Canva or anything like that. So it's complementary, I think. What we're learning in this product, in this PAL, could then be used to try and develop that scoring, or at least target some of the companies that are doing really well, and seeing if they want to actually use the stickers. So we see this as a complementary aspect, and that's why we've decided to partner with SAR and Aussie Way to work on this together. But yeah, let's
Yep.
go to questions. Anyone have any questions for Chris? Please put your hand up or question in the chat if you like. I actually
I
do have
can't
a.
imagine.
Oh, here we go,
Yeah.
Ronnie. Go,
Okay,
Ronnie. Yeah.
Ronnie. I'd also just before I answer your question, Ronnie, but I would ask if you agree with my assessment of what the frontiers are. That's my question
Yeah.
to you. Anyone want
Cool.
to disagree with me? Ronnie, go ahead.
Yes, hi. My name is Ronnie Andrade. I am Digital Accessibility Lead at RMIT University, and I was wondering if, as part of the vision for this sort of labeling system, is it also including advice on how to improve the score? And would this be sort of transparent for the companies that decide to label, like what is being assessed? Or would it be more like you give us a product and then we give you a label and the process is a mystery to you? How do you envision this to work?
Yeah, right. So we're working on the label and a validation standard. Right? So the validation standard would be saying that anybody can test in any way that they want, but so long as it's a way that produces a reliable score. So we have this validation standard. So our goal at the end of our standards development process is just to publish that. And we'll probably publish supporting resources, but it should probably be quite self-evident how you would get a good score there by following the validation elements and working towards doing the things that are described to get a good score. So if we think about WCAG tells you all the different elements divided up of what you should do on a website or an app, that sort of thing, and it gives you those element by element things. And but it doesn't roll it up into a score. We're just rolling it up into a score. So hopefully, again, it'll be fairly self-evident how somebody could get a good score. And we would hope that when we publish it, that the manufacturers would take it and they do their own internal testing, and their own internal validation. Maybe in the future there'd be a third-party validation system going on or something like that. But yeah, good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's a question in the chat from Kelly, assuming that this would need to be based on an automated review to make this efficient and consistent measurement, or is a manual consistent review being considered? And I guess that, if Ricky's on the call too, it'd be interesting to see what the process was as part of the streaming. So you go first, Chris, and then if Ricky wants to answer, please do.
Sure. So again, we're a bit test process agnostic. We got to realize that there's a lot of test processes out there. Some are public, and many of them are proprietary. So people are testing things in their own way. And so, if I have 10 accessibility companies, so that graphic that I had with everybody's using different scoring systems, well, they're all using different test processes as well. Some are using automated, and some are using manual, and some are using hybrids of the two. I personally don't care whether you're doing one or the other, but what I will say is that if you're saying to people that your automated test process covers 100% of the elements, at the minute, I don't think the technology is there. May change in the future, but I certainly don't think it's there right now. So you'd need some sort of manual element. But what the value of having this validation standard is basically to say, look, whatever the makeup of your test process, you can go through that and say, does this give me a reliable score that I can put into my label? Ricky, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, or Sam. Sam's on the call too. They're both part of the standards development. But yeah, go, Ricky.
Sure. Well, when I did the video streaming, one of the reasons that I limited it to websites was that I could apply WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And I used WCAG 2.2. I used several automated testing tools, and then I did manual testing to fill in the gaps that the automated tools couldn't do. In that process, I came up with basically a pass-fail system for every success criterion for every provider. That gave me a kind of a matrix of who did best in what areas on a pass-fail basis. That certainly would give you the basis for being able to say to one provider, the reason you got this score was because of this particular thing. Now, if you provided audio description for all your videos, you would have scored higher here. If you provided a skip to content link on your website, you would have scored higher there. So it's certainly possible to give product providers and vendors a reason for the ratings and a way to improve their scores. The hardest thing is probably deciding what standard you're going to use and assess to. WCAG is nice and easy. The one I'm working on now is peer-to-peer payment apps on native apps on mobile. And there, I mean, WCAG is useful, but it's not going to give me the whole thing. So I have to come up with some ways of testing things to compare between providers that are not necessarily already available in a standard. And that's part of what we do. We establish what those standards should be. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah.
That's great. And I think Kelly's got to follow up about the lack of consistent testing methods is an issue now, as we can't get the same result if two different people do an assessment. So, need to find a way to get a consistent result for it to be meaningful. I think that's a really good approach. And I think that's something that we're thinking about. Steve asked a question about QR codes on the product stickers.
Sure. I'll give you an insight that in the blurry image that I showed of the top secret things that we're talking about. It's not that top secret, but it's just really for members. But yes, QR codes, and how do you link to that? And you got to QR is probably the best system right now. We would need to again decide on the spec. How big is the QR code on the label? How prominent is it? Where is it displayed? What color is it? Where does it go to, and what is the format of that page to give you the information about the accessibility? Yeah, so that's one of the things. Yeah.
And Alex has commented, thanks, Chris. And I agree, the QR code or some way to get to guides and things like that, that accessible guides are going to be useful. That might be another criteria, to check that you have a way to get to those guides. With the pace that software is updated, either the heavy lift would want to be automated or some way of indicating when or which version achieved the attached rating. That's a good point as well. It's like there's those levels. We're finding that with the PAL. There's new accessibility conformance reports being put out. So, we will slowly get to them and go and review them. If you do have a digital product you'd like us to score for the PAL, there's the link I put in the chat. There's a form for you to actually enter some of those products for us to score, all by volunteers as well. So, Sam, you'd like to answer or comment on some of these as well?
Yeah, I was just looking at Alex's comment, and thanks, Alex, for putting that there. I just want to sort of help in terms of like level setting, and this brings out the bias of what we've been used to with more of a WCAG mindset from days gone by, because that's from an Australian's point of view in the year 2000, quite a few of us back then can remember sort of the collective, designer web experience trauma of the Sydney Olympic organising committee really not considering the inclusiveness of that website, and then the ripple effect it had throughout the multimedia community as well as, the early user experience and accessibility communities as practitioners. And so what I wanted to just sort of, keep planting the seed, in addition to what Chris was saying, is that don't necessarily think about it as software. And I'd say probably a nice way to think about it, or a different way to think about it, we've mentioned washing machines and things like that. Consider when you have safety ratings or scores for cars or vehicles, so that you can go on to either the manufacturer of that vehicle or through, a consumer reporting equivalent. You might want to look at a specific Holden. I do remember my Aussie cars. Though the one that you're particularly looking for, the 8-cylinder, 8.5 litre, I'm just dealing in different measurement systems here. But you may not find exactly the version of the Holden car that you're looking for. There may be something that's very similar. And of course, we know that, there are many, many, many cars out there that exist and that are changing, and that there are new editions. I mean, are you looking at the 2022 edition of the Kia, or are you looking for the 2025 edition of the Kia? Those are sort of more purchasing questions, rather than us necessarily literally testing every single version of a product or a piece of software. Again, it's more of an indicator to help people make purchasing decisions, to make, informed decisions about, this has a really high score, but I know that my Nana really can't see much anymore with macular degeneration. So I know that this particular thing didn't score so well on the sort of the low vision side of things. And so, compared to something that's similar, I think I would prefer to go ahead with this. And if I wanted to follow up with a more in-depth explanation, then I could do that with whoever's providing sort of that standard, report. So, and yes, consulted with Consumer Choice and Which. That one I can pass over to Chris as well, because that's certainly been a part of our conversations.
Yeah, there was a couple of questions from Steve here, and are the Europeans on board with all this? I think we have more Australian members than European members right now. We've got a couple of members from Poland and some others from Europe, but the yes, there's a lot of new stuff coming out of Europe, but you can't create a guide or you can't create a guide requiring something that doesn't exist yet. And so this that we are producing doesn't exist yet. We haven't created it. And no one, the reason we exist is nobody else was creating it. No other organization was, and no other organization seemed to want to create it. But lots of people in the accessibility field said that this was important and they should be involved in creating it. So they can't put it as a requirement yet. But one day they will be able to. We in the US, we have VPATs, the Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. Some of you may be familiar with it, just in terms of sales and to the US federal government and other customers in the US. They want to see this product accessibility template. Right now, that doesn't include a score on accessibility. But if we create a standardized score and the government says to themselves, well, wait a minute, there is a standardized score out here. Let's start demanding that when people send us their descriptions of how accessible their products are, that we'll demand that they put a standardized score on it. So that could happen. That could happen in Europe. That could happen in Australia. Which in the UK, yes, I've talked to the folks there, and we need to reconnect. There's a lot of people that we talk to, and they say, that's a great idea, and they don't necessarily think it's today that they want to join, but maybe later. That's one of the ones there. But we're gonna certainly reach out back to Which, and then in the Australia, the choice, and in the US, it's Consumer Reports. So those are the big three that do that same sort of work. But that's really what we set out to do, is to create something they could put in. Especially if they're a non-profit, they really should be serving the entire population. So yeah.
All right. Well, we're 1 minute over. That was great timing. Great questions from everyone. Thank you. And comments. There's a few people that have had to leave. But look, thank you so much for your time, Chris, and Sam and Ricky too, for your responses. And thanks for the Aussie Way members here for joining today. We will put this recording up either on, well, actually go on both websites. So go on Aussie Way and SAR. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll be sharing that with the people who had registered and couldn't make it today. Thanks, everyone. And also just...
can I just put in a final plug for the newsletter sign up?
You sure can. Yeah, go for it.
Just if you go to standardari.org, and if you do it right now, we're about to send out a newsletter this evening or tomorrow morning with some new material that we're putting out. But just on the homepage, bottom of the homepage, just sign up for the newsletter. That's the quickest thing you can do. Just need your email address. That's it. Thanks a lot.
Yep. And also just keep an eye out. We also put the newsletter out on Monday. Thank you, Ricky, for working on that, on some upcoming events for Aussie Way. We have Ask Professionals. We have 2. We're talking about legislation and policy in the EU time zone and also a US time zone. So check those out on our Aussie Way website under events. And also, if you'd like to be involved, we have our AGM coming up. So if you'd like to, please join Aussie Way. your membership is does come and help us support our partnerships and connections like this. So yeah, really worthwhile, and we're a lot cheaper actually. We're only $50 a year for advocacy. So, but yeah, help us to manage what we're doing here and keep this work going. Thanks everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your Friday and weekend.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bri.
Chris. Bye.